Okay, welcome back to this channel. This is Unfiltered Forex, and this video is the first part of the many other videos I will be releasing on this topic of educational material. Fundamental analysis is the process of examining factors affecting price and performance of an asset before making a decision. Factors affecting the price of an asset before making a decision. These factors can be social, political, economic, etc. But these are the main ones, especially political, economic factors. They affect prices of commodities quite a lot. What is the relationship between fundamentals and technicals, right? Technical analysis involves forecasting prices based on historical data, such as price and volume. Usually, technicals are often associated with short term analysis, while fundamentals are associated with long term analysis. But in practice, both can be used for short term and long term analysis of price. Yeah. Like myself, I use both of them, both technicals and fundamentals, to for day trading. They can both they can both be applied for short term, and that is what I'll be explaining. So, moving on. Now let's go to the main stuff, right? This is now the main contents. What exactly is fundamental analysis? What do I do? What is if you're doing fundamental analysis? What are you doing? So let's begin from the basics of the basics. This is economics. Fundamental analysis is all about economics. So we're going to start here. The branches. What are the branches of economics? If you don't know them, you now time for you to listen carefully. Listen and watch. So economics has two main branches, right? First one is microeconomics, right? The other one is macroeconomics. So, right, these are the two main branches of this thing. We're going to look at microeconomics first. So, what exactly is microeconomics? Microeconomics involves individual decision making. That's what microeconomics involves. Individuals meaning um, individual companies, a company, one company, or just the average consumer, company or consumer. So you can see here, microeconomics is the study of individual decision making. What companies do alone, the decision that companies make based on the products, the supply chains, the things they're selling, and the decisions consumers make on their own based on, this is where stuff to do with marginal utility comes in, price elasticity, demand elasticity. So yeah, all this is in microeconomics, individual decision making. In forex, this microeconomics is basically stocks, analysis of stocks. Yes, yeah, analysis of stocks. But this is stocks like as an individual. When you're analyzing the stocks as one company. Let's zoom in. So when you're analyzing stocks like one company, you're going to, this is where the microeconomic stuff comes in. This is where we talk about PE ratios, PE ratios, cash flows. You see stuff to do with accounting. It also falls here. Uh, cash flows. What else? Balance sheets. Balance sheets. This kind of stuff. Yeah, cash flows, PE ratios, balance sheets, all that all that talk about valuations. Yeah, valuations. This is mostly under microeconomics when you're looking at analyzing the individual companies. Uh, yeah, you're analyzing the stock price to know the actual if the company is overvalued or undervalued, to know if the company has potential, if the company is going to go far. You can see this, we're talking about one company individually. So this is under microeconomics, right? So, microeconomics, basically that's what it's about, analyzing individual decision making. And it ends there. It only affects stock prices and to some extent commodity prices, commodity commodity prices, commodity prices such as this is where metals come in, right? Metals. This is where we talk about consumer consumer trends, consumer preferences, yeah, stuff like that. Microeconomics. Mm, they do affect commodity prices, but for to a very small extent. Now let's go to the main one. The main one, macroeconomics. This is where we'll get to understand what this whole scope of fundamental analysis is, what exactly goes on here, what exactly do guys like me do. Let's draw a thick line there. Yeah. So let me start now. My macroeconomics. So what does macroeconomics do? Macroeconomics, this is the branch that deals with aggregates. This is where we talk about aggregate demand, aggregate supply. This is where we talk about governments, right? This is where we talk about governments. This is also where we talk about geopolitics, right? Geopolitics. It's also to do with macroeconomics. This is where we also talk about aggregate consumer behaviors. This is than that. Also aggregate investor behavior. Don't worry if you can't read, just listen to what I'm saying. I'm only writing for it to be a short summary to give you the clear picture of what this is. This is where we also talk about aggregate or collective market behavior behaviors. So yeah, macroeconomics, this is what it entails. Aggregate consumer behavior, aggregate investor behavior, collective market behavior. This is where we talk about governments, and when we talk about geopolitical factors, this is where this falls under macroeconomics. Because I won't get another chance, I don't think we'll cross with geopolitics anywhere else. Let me talk about it now. This is where stuff like pandemics, right? Pandemics falls under here. Pandemics, wars, pandemics like the COVID stuff, wars like what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in France, and yeah, even peace. Okay, there has never been a period of world peace, but when you talk about geopolitics, is mostly peace between two two countries mostly. Yeah, so that's that's geopolitics uh, under the macroeconomic umbrella. Now let's look at macroeconomic phenomena, right? Let's this topic is very wide, yeah. So let me write it here. This now when we talk about this phenomena, this is where we bring in stuff to do with inflation, GDP growth rates, interest rates. This is where we also talk about employment rates, macroeconomic phenomena. stuff like that. Also, this is where we talk about national income, spending, stuff to do with the budget allocation and what have yous. This is where we talk about imports and exports. This is where we talk about government debts, public spending, public expenditures, all that stuff. This is all macroeconomic phenomena. When you talk about macroeconomics, this is the stuff we're talking about. Under macroeconomics, uh, now when we look at governments as individuals, right? Let me write that here. Government. How a government is run is that there's two main policies controlling the market, right? Fiscal policy and you guessed that right, monetary policy. Monetary policy. Monetary policy, fiscal policy, and monetary policy. Let's look at the main differences between fiscal policy and monetary policy. All this is the basics of economics. This is the basics. Yeah, everyone who knows about economics, they know. Everyone who knows macroeconomics, they know about these things. And even you, I'm sure you have an idea of what I'm talking about. This not all of this is new. So under fiscal policy, this is where we have taxes and government expenditure expenditures. This is where talk about the budget allocations, national income, that. So the main elements of fiscal policy, of the main elements of enforcing fiscal policy are taxes and government expenditure, government spending, the budget. And talk about monetary policy, the main elements of monetary policy is interest rates are here. Something else, money supply, money supply. It also falls under here. Something else that falls under the elements of monetary policy. We have these two main ones are the most common. Now the other ones I'll continue with them is maybe things you might have never heard of. This is where we have QA and QT, and then there's open market operations. Open market operations. This is where stuff to do with bonds, stuff to do with bonds and government securities. Open market operations. Yeah, the it's an element of monetary policy. Looking at now we're done with that. I've highlighted the elements. Now something else. Now let's go to how this thing relates to the forex market, right? Because we are trading currencies. Something I forgot to mention here. Let's go back here a bit. Something I forgot, something important I forgot to mention here. While we said stocks, push it this way, yeah. While we said macroeconomics affects microeconomics affects stock prices. You can see there. While we said microeconomics affects stocks prices, macroeconomics on the other hand affects. This is now what affects currencies, uh, affects commodities, commodity prices, currency prices, commodity prices, and last but not least, the stock market as a whole. The stock market, the aggregate, yeah, the collective, the aggregate stock market as a whole. So you have the stock market, currencies, commodities. All these prices are affected by the macroeconomic situation of a country or of an economy or of the world economy as a whole. So now let me come here. Now let me go back here. Governments. How do governments, no, fiscal policy and monetary policy, how do these two affect exchange rates? So fiscal policy affects exchange rate in the short term, in the long term only. in the long term only. When we talk about monetary policy, this one affects exchange rates in the both in the short term and in the long term. We're going to get to these things slowly as we go. You're going to when I'm through with this, you're going to understand why the market moves the way it moves, what factors make the market move in the long term, what factors make the market move in the short term, which factors should you consider when you're doing these things. So there you have it. Affects exchange rates in the long term. Fiscal policy, monetary policy affects exchange rate in the short term and in the long term also. So continuing, mhm, this we're highlighting the main differences. So fiscal policy is highly affected by politics and regime change. Regime change of if this president resigns or is voted out and a new president comes, that's a new regime. Or if the main political parties, the leading party in the opposition, they are having a struggle, like we saw recently with the debt ceiling, with the debt ceiling drama. These are things that uh, affect fiscal policy a lot. They affect government spending a lot because every regime will come with its own method of how to spend money, how to collect more money with the taxes stuff. Yeah. So fiscal policy is highly affected by politics, but monetary policy is not affected by politics, by these politics and regime change. These things usually don't affect monetary policy at all. They don't. Maybe in the long term, but mostly no. Whether whether it's President A or President B who has gotten in, the monetary policy stance is decided by the central bank. So that's another difference, but I'll not write it here. You just know that in mind. The monetary policy is controlled by the central bank. Fiscal policy is controlled by, let's write that here. The central bank is in charge of the monetary policy. That's why it's independent. It's not affected by politics. So, yes, I think these are the main differences. Yeah, these are the main ones that I should mention. From here now, we should talk about the next thing I'll talk about now is you see now we have moved away from fiscal policy because this does not affect exchange rates in the short term. It only affects exchange rates in the long term. So we are on this side now, monetary policy and central bank activities. So here's what we're going to look at economic indicators affecting monetary policy. Let's pull this up. Let's pull this up. Economic indicators affecting monetary policy. This is where now we have inflation rate, yeah, because the goal of the mission, the goals of central bank, they have two main agendas mainly to maintain the to maintain price stability, but to maintain price stability and the employment situation, full employment. So those are the two main goals of the central bank, and they have tools for that. Tools. This is where looked at. We you remember we mentioned QE and QT, controlling money supply, open market operations. Yeah, those are the tools central bank use. So economic indicators affecting monetary policy: inflation rates, unemployment rates, interest rates, GDP, and then exchange rates. But this one is we'll talk. Let me let me say something about this one before I continue. So these are the main ones, and but this one for exchange rate is it affects monetary policy in small countries. Let me say in small countries and in countries that use a fixed exchange rate regime. There's fixed and flexible. Fixed There's a fixed exchange rate regime and there's a flexible exchange rate regime. So countries that use central banks that employ the fixed one, that's where intervention is very important for the central bank to come in when their currency is getting too weak or maybe too strong. Yeah, exchange rate. So yeah, now let me say something about these things. These economic indicators. This is where now fundamental the average fundamental analysis focuses on these main ones, these inflation rates, unemployment rate, interest rates, GDP. They affect currencies both in the short term and in the long term, especially inflation and unemployment rates. What I'm going to say about these two is these ones, isn't Billy. These are the main ones, and the the most volatile ones. And which one? Knowing which is more important than the other depends on the economic cycle cycles. Yeah, depends on the economic cycles. So there's a there's boom and a bust. This every I think everyone knows about these ones. There's a boom and a bust. The boom is a period of economic growth. Everything is good. So during when the economy is booming, what comes into focus is the inflation rate, right? Like you saw in 2021, the U.S. economy was doing very good, and the world economy as a whole, due to the post-COVID recovery period, and then the problem of inflation came on. So inflation is what's closely watched during an economic boom. When there's a bust, this is a period of economic downturn when things fall, and during that period of in between the economy falling and the economy rising, that period of a bust, the numbers in focus here, the numbers that steal the limelight is the employment numbers, right? Yeah. So that's important to remember. If you want to know which rate is going to move the market the most, you need to know if the country's economy is in a boom or in a bust cycle. Economies usually are in the boom phase, so inflation is usually the main one for the most part. Yeah. With that, now I think now I can zoom out. Can zoom out. You can see all these things. Yeah, all this stuff to do with fundamental analysis. It all revolves around economics. Microeconomics is very, let me call it, shallow when it comes to this kind of work that I do. The macroeconomic part is not so major. This other macroeconomic side is what's most important. This is where currencies fall. This is the part that affects currency prices, the stock market as a whole, commodity prices, and going down, as you have seen here. This is where now these are the main economic releases that affect um, market prices in the short term. Coming down, yeah, you've seen it's macroeconomic phenomena, governments and the central banks, monetary policy, fiscal policy. Here we divide, we come to monetary policy. Down here we go down further, we come to monetary policy and factors, economic indicators that affect monetary policy. The monetary policy stance of a country. So, um, as I finalize, this is where now let me draw the line there. As I finalize, this is where now I'd like to talk about the economic calendar. Economic calendar. Yeah. So as you have seen, these these economic indicators, they affect monetary policy and in turn affect market prices in the short term. So yeah, this is where now the economic calendar comes in. These major releases have different names. Like for inflation, let's talk about the US for now. For inflation, we have the CPI as a measure of inflation. We have the PCE price index as a measure, another in measure of inflation. There's also the GDP price index as another measure of inflation. There's also the producer price index as another measure of inflation. So these 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 releases are specific to the US economy. Other countries also have them, but they call them different names. So these readings are specific to the US economy, and they are the measures of inflation. They fall on different dates on the economic calendar, and they have short-term and long-term effects on the. They have short-term and long-term effects on the US on market prices. Market prices now they now let me say this. They affect prices of currencies currencies quoted versus the USD. Uh, Currencies quoted against the USD. They also have an effect on commodity prices like gold and gold and silver. They also have an effect on the stock market as a whole. So when you talk about the stock market as a whole, this is where we talk about the S&P 500, the the Nasdaq index, and the US 30 Dow Jones. So these are the indices that measure the strength or weakness of the stock market. So yeah, these inflation readings have a very high impact on these things. Yes. So here now is where we go to the now's when the now's not the time to go deeper into other stuff to do with inflation readings, but yeah, this is other than inflation in the economic calendar. There's also dates for the employment employment numbers. When the employment numbers are coming out, there's also the dates are also included in the economic calendar. I'll do a separate video for this thing and talk about this all these dates. So yeah, for now, I think I will stop there for today.